Welcome to the Wing Chun Discussion Podcast with your hosts, Dane and Vito, interviewing Wing Chun practitioners and instructors, expanding the world of Wing Chun. Let's see, today's episode we had Moy Tung come and join us from Richmond, Virginia. What did you think about that, Dane? How'd you like that one?
He was very interesting, very polite, very eccentric, had a lot to talk about. He shared with us some history about himself and about the arts and integration in Hong Kong and mainland China and all the chaos that ensued with Yip Man's life and him learning the arts and teaching the arts. And he even went into a little bit about Bruce Lee and its effect on everybody here in the United States and making Wing Chun actually a thing.
The conversation always goes to Bruce Lee, am I right?
Always.
Always. I guess because it's Wing Chun, like it's inevitable that someone has something to say about Bruce Lee. So
yeah, it's an American thing too, because our idea of Wing Chun is intimately tied to Bruce Lee.
Yeah, which is cool because he's a super interesting character.
He's like an icon. He's one that kind of bridged the white person doing kung fu. Before him, there wasn't a hugely popular accepted aspect for non-Chinese to learn the martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
Here in America, it wasn't really taught outside.
He brought a lot of popularity.
I'm not going to say that it was all him because I know there were other teachers. In fact, I did a lot of research on this. There were a lot of teachers, in fact, that were teaching non-Chinese Chinese martial arts back then. It's just that I think he made it popular because of the movies.
Yeah, which were pretty awesome.
Yeah, the movies were awesome.
You can when you see those movies, you really see Bruce Lee's strength, like in a raw sense. It's not even so much cinematic, it's like you just see it.
Let's get real. It's his style. Everyone loves his style. He was so cool back then. True. He was like hip hop before hip hop was there.
Yeah. So this episode was a lot of fun. And then I want to give a shout out to Tamara and Ryan for their help, helping set up the appointment. And actually, I got connected with them through a friend of mine. I'll give a shout out to her. Name is Rainbow. She's in the chat. And so thanks to them, we were able to get this set up and have an amazing interview, with Moy Tung.
Yeah, very appreciative of all that. It was a really unique experience, and hopefully we'll be able to get him on again sometime to go a little bit more in depth.
All right. So, without further ado, check it out. We have episode today with Moy Tung. Welcome to the Wing Chun Discussion Podcast. I'm Vito.
And I'm Dane, and today we're here with Sifu Moy Tung. And Sifu Moy Tung, are you there?
Yes, I am.
It's a pleasure to have you today.
Yeah, really nice to speak with you today.
Nice to speak with you guys, too. I appreciate the interview here.
So start us off. Tell us and our listeners, briefly, just a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
Yeah, my name's Anthony Dandridge. My Kung Fu name is Moy Tung. That's a name my Sifu gave me after I was training for maybe about 10 years or so and had become a Sifu under him. I'm originally born in Richmond, Virginia, actually. My family is from the Hanover area, which is there's 3 counties around Richmond. We have an old family, a lot of land and stuff like that. And I was born here, but after about 3 years, Dad being in the military, we were gone. He took the whole family over to Germany twice. When we weren't in Germany, we lived in Baltimore and all that. Then we settled in South Jersey, right outside of Philly. By the time I was in high school, I pretty much settled up north in Philadelphia, New Jersey, and all that. And college and stuff was up in that area. And a lot of my martial art training, although I did train a lot in Richmond with friends and relatives I knew down here, but basically out of the Philadelphia area. Some guys I knew in New York and North Jersey was one thing, but most of my training ended up being like, at that point when I'm a kid doing karate and things of that nature was all around South Jersey, Philadelphia, and stuff like that. I met my Sifu when I'm in my early 20s, like around 21, something like that. Those old days, it's kind of crazy, But I was training with a bunch of guys at that point when I met Grandmaster Moy Yat. Just training like with different associations or clubs, and was training out of a karate school in Philadelphia and everything. And I was actually an assistant karate instructor for the sensei of that school in downtown Philly. And it was,
Hmm.
pretty interesting times, a lot of fun. You're talking about between 1979 and 83, that little 4 year period was quite an amazing time for me personally in martial arts. And but like I met Sifu somewhere between 80, 81, pretty sure. And in those days, it was one of those deals where literally it was like $50 a month. And if you didn't come that month, you didn't have to pay the tuition. If you made it that month, you paid the tuition. It was really informal. Like a lot of martial arts
Oh,
schools
wow.
tried to operate that. And $50
Uh-huh.
a month was a lot of money, right? Back in those days. And so that was it. I started with him for the first year, got a few lessons from it. But something about Wing Chun kind of grabbed me. I don't know what it was. And next thing you know, I'm starting to pick up my schedule there. And then by 1984, I became a 100% full fledged disciple under Grandmaster Moy Yat, or my master was Moy Yat. And that was
Hmm.
it. I mean, at that point, it was just nothing but Wing Chun. Since 1984, I've been a disciple of my master, Moy Yat, my Sifu, and he passed away in 2001. But we still have the Kung Fu family here, named mostly after him. Some of my schools have different names, but we teach the Moy Yat Wing Chun system, or what I've learned from my Sifu, and what is the Moy Yat Wing Chun Kung Fu system, the way he has authorized, me to teach, and has authorized like 30 of my students to teach as well. Back when he was alive, back in the 90s and all that sort of stuff in the year 2000, honestly, before he passed away. And so, we have a strong Kung Fu family from the old days. And, some guys do it full time. A lot of other guys, they got their jobs and their family, but they might run a school part time or something,
Hmm.
putting in maybe 15, 20 hours a week. Running a school is like having a part time job. So a few of our Sifus are like that. And then we have a number of Sifus who are full time guys. Maybe they have 2 or 3 branches under them or something. But it's just like training, training the whole system, every form, all the weapons, but especially the heavy duty Chi Sao training, which is, Wing Chun is famous for is Chi Sao.
Yeah.
I've found that it's just a great thing to offer people. Like, we've been public about it ever since we started. We advertise in open marketplaces and martial arts circles. And, my first school was open in 1986. And I literally had 20 guys who had black belts and 20 guys who had no belts and no experience whatsoever. It was crazy. But after
I'm
four
curious.
years, all these guys were Wing Chun hardcore. It was pretty crazy.
Oh, they converted, huh?
Yeah. Well,
I'm.
not so much as converted. Some of them just added the Wing Chun to them, and some guys became full on Kung Fu guys. You know how it goes. It's up to what people want to do. We don't try to make someone necessarily have to do Wing Chun only. I've actually taught
Uh-huh.
a lot of people who just want to put Wing Chun in their schools. I've had a lot of clients like that, and I'm very
Hmm.
open to that. Anything I can do to help the martial arts, I'm doing. And with our school, though, we definitely only teach the Wing Chun system. That's it. And
Hmm.
to say only, I mean, just say purely we teach the Wing Chun system. And it's a
I'm
pretty big
curious.
thing. It's a hard science. It takes about 4 years to really get thoroughly trained in a complete system. So we have a program that's like a 2 year program and a 4 year program. If someone stays
Mhm.
for 2 years, they usually do pretty good. They'll complete usually their training at the end of 4 years or so. And that's our general, clientele. And I mean, it's good because you really got to be thorough and make sure everyone knows everything, put the hours in on training, and they rock out. After, 70% of our enrollment's gone, in that 4 to 5 year period. And then we have a certain amount of guys who are long termers, and I got a certain amount of seekers under me. That's about it.
Mhm.
All just from, training. School's been open for like over 30 years now. I've been with Sifu since, like I said, before I became a disciple in '84. I started with him somewhere in '81, very informally, as I said. But then I started learning more from him, and it was like this is a science that I never dreamed could even exist, so to speak. Let's be honest about it. You're talking about the early '80s. I had a number of years of experience in other martial arts before then.
Mhm.
I started when I was a kid in martial arts, so, but I'm an adult when I finally really become very serious about Wing Chun. I'm able to really discuss Kung Fu with my Sifu like head to head. He was very open and very generous with all of the students that he had. He just is amazing. All the guys like my C Hings and my C Dai from those old days, just unbelievable people.
So I'm
So
curious. I'm curious a bit about you were mentioning back in '84 training under Moy Yat. Like, what was a day of training like at that time? Like, what would a class look like?
well, it's interesting. It's very interesting. Like number one for sure, part of your kung fu training would definitely be very personal. Like if depending on how you're training as a disciple with Sifu, there's a lot of stuff we did that's just whatever your personal kung fu your Sifu wants to teach you. Then the
Hmm.
general classes are also general classes because you have in the school a lot of people who are regular students or the
Hmm.
regular clientele. And so Sifu always had that open 2-year program for anyone who came along to learn Wing Chun from his school in Chinatown. He was a very open person, like Sigong Yip Man was, because Yip Man also taught a tremendous amount of people in Hong Kong. But then he also had an inner circle. And the inner circle were the people who put in more hours in training. A general class for a Wing Chun practitioner, whether it's the Hong Kong days with Qigong or the Chinatown days with Seafood, your general class is going to be like an hour to maybe an hour and a half, right? Monday,
Hmm.
Wednesday, Friday.
Hmm.
And that's what you pay the tuition for. So you start the school, it's $50 a month. For the month you're there, so you can train on any of the Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule, right? From 7 p.m. to about 8:30. That's basically 12 classes a month. And if you don't come there the following month, like literally there were guys in the class and they really, it was like you just don't pay the tuition the next month because you're not there. If you happen to get there 3 or 4 months later, you pay the tuition for that month and you sort of take the class. Almost like a yoga class, right? You go to certain yoga studios and it's like if you're there for that week, you pay for that week, and if you're not, whatever. But it
Yeah.
was very like in that sense, I guess, very non-commercial, I guess. But there was a tuition always that you're supposed to pay for the class. And Seawood, a really well set up school, a lot of great sea hangs who were doing a lot of the instructing and stuff like that, as well as Sifu, got out there and shared kung fu with people. I mean, it was definitely some cool classes in Chinatown. And for me, like being a 21-year-old guy, okay, in 1981, over 10 years of training behind me, because I started before I'm even, like around 9 or 10 years old, I really started in martial arts under my dad. Really got great opportunity to study different martial arts from different instructors over the years. It was great. So I was pretty sharp. I was a really good fighter. I mean, technically still am a good fighter, but I mean, back then, being 21 years old, the things I had learned, I was a good fighter. I was definitely not like searching for some cure or something. Like I was just training with a lot of different instructors between Philly and New York and mixing things and happy about it. And Moy Yat, in my opinion, was going to be one of those guys I trained with, right? I had no idea like a year later that the only thing I'd be thinking about was Wing Chun. So suddenly I'm
Mm.
22, 23, whatever. By the time I'm 23, I don't want to think about anything else other than Wing Chun. I just want to train Wing Chun. And I've been through a lot of experiences with other martial artists and the other schools that I worked out with to show me how I really was very fortunate to have met Sifu and started training in the New York school as a regular student. Okay. So that's like
Hmm.
gonna be like a $50 a month thing. And again, you're supposed to go from about 7 to 8:30. Okay.
Hmm.
So then if you become a special student though, or the
Hmm.
SSA Special Student Association, there's a big group of us. There's about 60 to 80 of us right now from the old days that are still active. Of
Oh,
course
that's
we don't
big.
know
Yeah.
each other and see each other at different banquets and stuff. And these are the guys from the Moy Yat Kung Fu Family SSA, which is the Special Student Association. Now these are all the guys where you paid a certain tuition and you suddenly had access to the school technically 24/7. It was no longer a 4 hour, or rather, an hour and a half workout on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Every Monday, Wednesday, Friday involved at least a 4 hour workout. You could get to the school early, 6, 5 even, or whatever, and then stay as late as midnight if you wanted to. But most people might have a schedule where they would train somewhere between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. Honestly, between 2.5 hours to 4 hours of kung fu practice was the average that the Kung Fu brothers would do, like back in the 80s.
I'm curious, like, what kind of training did you guys do for 2 hours? Like, when you first come in to the
Yeah.
time you leave, what
No,
kind of progression was
that's
it?
right. That is an understandable question and technically a good question, you know. And because the old days of training is much different from a lot of the new days of training.
Yeah, I
In
think
the
so
old
too.
days, someone actually might do Pak Sao for 3 hours and forms for an hour. In the
Wow.
school where there's brothers and where Sifu's present to get input from Sifu or to not even worry about getting input because a lot of times you just came there to work out. It wasn't like you came to class and expected Sifu to always teach you something, but you came to class to practice with the other brothers what you were learning, you know? And then when you were at home, you played a lot of forms at home so you could be ready for the next class. Because these classes
Mhm.
were pretty kind of crazy. They were hardcore, especially in Chisao. There's a lot of contact to the chest and all that kind of stuff. And you had to build your body up to take
Mm.
that like something that would be long term, like training like that for 3 or 4 years, where someone's hitting your chest a lot is, you got to build up for that and all. It's a whole training program. Like the early stages of something like that, you might be only working on the basics, Pak Sao, Lap Sao, Down, Chi Sao and actually training 4 hours or 3 hours or 2.5 hours, whatever, only working on your Sinam Tao and only working on Pak Sao or something, only working on Lap Sao. So you made it like such a part of your body. Like you own this technique, you put so many hours into it. That was the way a lot of people train. I mean, in a lot of different styles too, not just Wing Chun Kung Fu, but
Mhm.
the kind of Kung Fu guys you ran across, a lot of them had decent number of hours behind their training too. It didn't matter what style they were, you know. So if you train in kung fu, because think about it, right? In 1983, it was 10 years after Bruce Lee died. All right,
Oh, okay.
let's bring Bruce Lee in for 1 second, okay?
Yeah.
10 years after Bruce Lee died. Now, during that time period, I don't think there's anyone on the planet that could understand that era of martial arts fanaticism unless they were alive during that. If they weren't born or old enough to be, going to martial arts schools during that era and before Bruce Lee died. Because before Bruce Lee died, there's a lot of different martial arts schools. A lot of them were very brutal. Just like they had no concern about liability or anything. They were just very brutal adults beating the hell out of each other. It was really crazy, right?
Oh man.
Brucey comes along. He fits into it perfectly because he's a tough as nails dude. He's little and he has power that just it jumps off the screen. Everyone can see it. He's totally
Mhm.
different from any martial artist who made a movie or guys who were in tournaments. So everyone really took to him. When he died, it blew everyone's mind, and people want to know his secret though. They want to know how the hell did he generate so much power? How did he
Mhm.
move with such great speed and even grace and everything, right? Because you could look at some of the best trained martial artists and they were not somehow capable of doing what Bruce Lee did. All right, so he dies. Suddenly there's an earthquake for like 20 years. The first 10 years was from 73 to 83. Guys, everybody wanted to be the next Bruce Lee, you name it. I mean, they're training in all kind of martial arts. They're mixing stuff, trying to be like Jeet Kune Do or whatever. Well,
Mhm.
finally, something comes out of our Wing Chun roots that Bruce Lee belongs to. So all the Wing Chun schools fill up. It's crazy, you know? And me being like 21 in 1981, I was one of the youngest guys involved in that kind of scene as far as age wise. Okay. The
Mhm.
rest of these dudes were like anywhere from 45 as an average. Some dudes might be in their 30s. That's great. Most dudes were older, you know? And there were a lot of these grandmasters from the old country who were in their 60s and 80s, and they're just teaching like crazy different styles from karate to different styles of Wing Fu.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was an amazing time period. It was crazy. And so by the time the 90s got here, whatever was built in the 80s goes into the 90s. So that's great. 90s were pretty cool. And then by the end of the 90s, I would say the martial arts has a different kind of a change in just the era. Generations have changed. People have changed. People are so removed from whatever Bruce Lee did. They don't really understand it. They see his movies, they're like, wow, that guy was great. But they don't understand like the 10 years that Bruce Lee actually had fully packed movie theaters for 10 freaking years, dude. Like, no kidding. Like the movies that he ran, they would be in number one theaters for about 2 or 3 years in those days. Honestly, that's the only place you could see them
Wow.
were in the number one theaters.
And there weren't a lot of martial arts movies back then, I think,
there was
either,
a
right?
bunch of them, and none of them did what Bruce Lee did. Also,
Hmm.
none of the regular stars from Hollywood either. No one
Hmm.
had a movie that stayed in the theater for a couple of years. And I'm
Yeah.
sure if you try to look up the records to that kind of stuff, there would probably not be much information about it because we live in a world that's really weird. I don't want to use the race card or whatever, but Bruce Lee was very discriminated against. So maybe they
Hmm.
don't want to give him credit for something he did. But with his kung fu that he brought here to the Western world, when he hit the screen, he did some of the most incredible stuff. Every one of his movies, right? Like I'm going to do the American names of Fist of Fury, Chinese Connection, and Enter the Dragon, and then Return of the Dragon, and then there was Game of Death, which were bits and pieces of a film that Lee was working on before he died, and they put it together with some doubles and all that. So you know that
Hmm.
story. So we're looking at 5 films. Most people who were maybe born 10 or 20 years later, they think Bruce Lee made 100 films because there were so many Bruce Lee imitators after he died. Like there's all these kung fu movies that came out. It's crazy. But he
Oh
only
yeah.
made 5 films. So
Hmm.
Fist of Fury, Chinese Connection, Enter the Dragon, and Return of the Dragon. During maybe a 5-year period to a 10-year period after Bruce Lee passed away, all of his movies were replayed in first run theaters and would run for a couple of years. Everybody and the houses would be packed. No one ever saw that before because it was amazing how many people just had to see that guy on the screen. There weren't VCRs back then that people could have a home version of it. People went to the theaters. And then it went to the dollar theaters after that, or the equivalent of whatever the dollar theaters are, where they would have like a
Yeah.
5 feature thing, and that would be just awesome because it's a full day of having fun as a kid or a young person. These things were very entertaining and wonderful. But the
Yeah.
movies were one thing. Doing martial arts in real life with people was crazy. All the tournaments they had back then, the different styles, Taekwondo, Shotokan, you name it, all the derivatives, whatever. Some of the hardcore internal styles that came out of China, blah, 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 blah. Bunch of martial artists just really trying to figure it out. I got to say, it was really a good time in America, for America, to actually have a breakthrough in martial arts. So it became more mainstream. Before Bruce Lee, there was still a lot of martial arts taught in America, but it didn't explode until after that thing happened. And it was
Hmm.
great. I mean, it's a great thing. You can't argue with it. Ultimately, it turns out to be like all the different martial arts when they're taught correctly, no matter what. When the teacher is actually clear about what the physical body needs and you know the mental discipline necessary to get through the training. It's all very healthy for people. It's a great exercise. It keeps their health at 100%. I mean, it's wonderful. Clear mind, nice and focused with all this kind of
Yeah.
great benefits that come from it other than fighting. You know, obviously fighting is the number one thing why we study martial arts for. But when you can learn other things from it to help your daily life, that's great. And then you teach other people, that's a wonderful thing too. So you can
Yeah.
almost say Bruce Lee was responsible for the growth of martial arts in the Western world, you know, as well as the Eastern world.
Yeah, we have this amazing history with with the rise of martial arts during that time, and now that we're talking about some of the things that are good with martial arts, I'm wondering for you, like, what are maybe like 3 principles that are super important to you when it comes to your practice or when you're teaching, like that?
Interesting, interesting, interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting, good question. Also, principles are one thing, and then philosophy is another. Then there's methodology. When you look at principles, are we talking like what type of person should study martial arts, and what type of person do you need to be to get into advanced martial arts, or what are the key concepts that you should focus on if you're studying martial arts, etc., or something like that? And for me, like what would be the 3 key concepts or principles or guidelines to my personal martial arts training, you would say, or teaching?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, like
some guidelines or things like that. One for sure is that the training equation, the amount of time that a person has to put into martial arts in order to gain a certain level, a higher level, and
mhm,
then the fact that it is a very acceptable thing for people to practice martial arts with less hours and look at it only as a hobby. They don't have to look at it as entire lifestyle, or they want to be a high level expert or a master, whatever, a teacher. What really the true principles that guide us with martial arts is helping the community. Making sure that men and women, and then also the program extends to the children, that they can learn something that will make them stronger, healthier, and able to protect themselves and loved ones if necessary, things of that nature, and
Hmm.
also something that might bring out stronger character. Like, let a person really learn. First, you learn to relax, of course, is one thing. You find out really who you are that way. You're just more clearer about yourself. And then, maybe, a little bit more honest with yourself about the things you have to do in life and maybe set some good goals. A lot of good things come out of martial art training. It's a great motivator. Most of the people that I know who really are successful in martial arts have really pretty cool jobs. They work really hard. They do cool stuff.
Hmm.
That's, I think, a very important thing, for people to understand. It's something that really fits in your life as if you would go to high school and college. That's the way martial arts really should be looked at as far as training. Like, everyone
Hmm.
should get a 4-year experience in martial arts training. And if someone wants to get more, of course, you have to have the capacity for them to do a 10-year program or a 20-year program. I mean, I have some students who've been with me, they're still with me for 30 years. I mean, guys who have had schools now for maybe over the last 25 years, kind of a deal. I mean, there's long-term relationships you do develop in the martial art community. Your brothers and people from other styles. I mean, I know guys from karate for the last 40 years, so you
Oh yeah.
have long-term relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
But for sure, the people you meet, though, your clientele, like, what are you there for? Your reason to be there is to make sure that people are better, like, after they've met you and they get an experience of you and your facility and the program that's there. You want them to have something better in their life. You want to leave a place better than you found it. You want someone's experience with you to make them better because that's what you're supposed to be offering. So obviously, in this case, it's Wing Chun Kung Fu. There's a Sifu there. They're really supposed to make sure the student knows how to work out, how to really get an hour of working out at home or anywhere they're at. How do they, without even a partner, you can train Wing Chun for sure. But if you have a buddy who also trains Wing Chun too, a little bit with you, then great, right? But how to really work out for an hour and then finally 2 hours. And if someone wants to take it far enough to learn how to do the 4 hour workout, it's like now you've got that for your whole life. You actually know how to set aside 4 hours and do a workout that will be amazing every time you do it. Not that we
Yeah.
try to compare or expect things in our life. Like the old masters always warn you, never expect. Always go with an open mind or empty cup. But still, for some reason, if you do take the time to train for 4 hours, it's mind blowing no matter what. So if you do
Yeah.
that for about a 10-year period, you've got a certain amount of comfort. You don't have to do that for the rest of your life. Maybe you might have a training for 10 years where you really only work out, an hour and a half workout, maybe an hour. Then you go to another cycle 10 years after that where maybe you're training for 2 or 3 hours per workout, however. Maybe you come back to the 4 hour workout again. Maybe you go in and out. There's so many different Kung Fu people that train different ways. And over the years, you get a whole bunch of different Kung Fu that all connects. So as you get older, you should have a lot of Kung Fu behind you that
Hmm.
connects and is good and healthy for you, as well as something you can share with other people, make sure it's healthy for them. That's important,
Yeah.
how to physically do a workout, why to do the workout, and then especially developing, that human side of everything. Make sure people realize that you can't be a bully. You've got to definitely be a good person with Kung Fu. I've noticed that Kung Fu doesn't really move forward with someone or it doesn't pass to another person, unless the person really is rather sincere and has that, good heart and fairness toward their fellow human. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
Kung Fu is not for people that want to go out and be oppressive or domineering. It's just for people who want to enjoy life and help others enjoy life and be happy, be healthy. You know, that's the way it was from Southern China. That's not me talking. Okay, this is Wing Chun. That's
Uh-huh.
Southern China. That's Hong Kong. When those guys in Hong Kong had to build the Wing Chun family, right? You're talking about Sigong Yip Man getting to Hong Kong in the mid 40s, like around 45, 46. He gets there. And the reason why is because of this incredible war going on in China. The communists were basically overtaking everything. And the communists were not just the Soviets, but it was the northern Chinese that
Mm-hmm.
were connected to Manchurian dynasties,
Mm-hmm.
who were all basically serving the Communist Party, and Russia was basically their leaders at that time too. They connected with them on the whole communist thing back in the 20s. But they were able to make their move in the mid 40s, right after World War II, because of all the Allied forces being depleted and all this crazy stuff. Had that big
Mm-hmm.
old giant World War II. It was crazy, right? The Japanese came in and really did a number on China with their invasion during World War II. As soon as the Japanese were defeated, next thing you know, the communists used that as the opportunity to overtake all of China because Southern Chinese military, Chiang Kai shek, and all those guys were depleted because of their warfare against Japan. So there was because
Wow.
as Japan was invading China, of course, China's fighting back.
Yeah.
And China is our ally. Like Southern China is technically our allies from the old days, from back then especially. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
we have allies with India, we have allies with Southern China. Right now, it wasn't even a dicey relationship. I know those opium wars have all kind of crazy stories to them too, but understand that Southern China has always had this direct and relationship evolving with the Western world. Starting with the European countries, of course. But when America came into the mix, something about China and America clicked. Even in the 1800s, all the immigration from Southern China to America.
Oh yeah.
And there was a lot
Yeah.
of crazy things going on. So I'm just saying that when World War II hit, and the communists took over all of China, that was a severe blow to the entire world. That knocked people for a loop. At the same time, Russia was invading Europe, and that's why we built the Berlin Wall and all that. The Allied forces, especially America, stood up against Russia, and we split Germany in half and all that nonsense.
Yeah.
Kids forget about that nowadays. I lived during that era. Like I was born in 1960. My dad fought in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, that kind of stuff. So I
Mm.
grew up understanding the history and that we were actually fighting communism in Europe as well as in Asia. So when the communists took over all of China, the only thing that stopped them was the US forces. That's what we parked to destroy them.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? I mean, that's why there was a Hong Kong.
Right.
It wasn't
And
that the
then,
communist forces went, oh, hey, we're going to stop here. They didn't do that.
yeah.
They were made to stop. There was a serious negotiation that involved the fact that if they didn't stop their invasion, we were going to be forced to do a second round of atomic weapons to stop them.
Right.
The first rounds in Japan were bad enough, but the murderous rampage that was going on from the communists, it was like a blitzkrieg attack. By the time America and the Allied forces could really respond, like so much had been done, but then we create a safe zone.
Mm-hmm. In Hong Kong at this time, right?
Yeah,
And this is where like the martial arts were able to proliferate because they were safe and they were able to practice. Yip
the
Man came to Hong Kong at
refugees,
this time.
right, the refugees from the communist invasion, if they could make it to Macau or Hong Kong or the new territories or Taiwan, they were safe.
Yeah.
They could enjoy democracy.
Yeah, it's amazing this history and then it comes all the way to the US and then and Wing Chun is super popular today with the Yip Man movies have made a resurgence. Bruce Lee brought a lot of the attention to
Oh
Yip
yeah,
Man.
no, but even
So I'm
before the
wondering.
Yip Man movies, right? Yip
Mhm.
Man became extremely famous, and there were probably at least 1,000 or more branches around the world from the Yip Man family after he passed away, between like 73 to say 2003, right?
Mhm.
That's the 30-year period of the Yip Man family really going around the world and sharing Wing Chun Kung Fu with people and so forth. All of his students and also super important, his disciples. Like Moy Yat was a disciple of Yip. Not every Yip Man student was a disciple. So,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of Wing Chun now in the world. And obviously, there's other Wing Chun families that have come out of China too, because we have descendants to Long Chun, we have descendants to Chao Shun, and you can go back even further. Shaolin Temple stuff and all that, you get it. The Wing Chun system that we're talking about that, came from Moy and the Venerable Five and all that during that era, and then there's a story of Yim Wing Chun and her husband, Long Bak Tao, and then this
Yeah.
certain connection thing. And it's interesting, and not that we're going to talk about that today or anything like that, but the point is that that's a story that Sigong made sure that Sifu knew, and they put it in these stone chops to have it for the future generations, because Moy Yat was an artist even back in the Hong Kong days when he's training under Yip Man, you know? So he trained under Yip Man for approximately 1958 to 73 or 72. So 57 to 72, something like 58 to 72 is how long he trained. So, he's of course with Sigong in the end, but he also had quite a long life with Sigong and Masifu had 3 schools in Hong Kong, a lot of students, all this kind of stuff, a lot of experience in Wing Chun. And so they got together to have this big project get done by using these valuable stones that they use as stamps. They call them chops, all that sort of stuff. They put the whole story of the Wing Chun history together. Yip Man wanted the official story. And so that's his official idea of the people who were the grandmasters of each era, or the grandmasters and any of their descendants of each era that kept Wing Chun alive so it could get here to its future. Like what did they do in
Incredible.
China to keep this science alive is amazing, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
then you have things
incredible.
like the communist invasion. That was one invasion. Remember, before that, it was the Japanese invasion. Then they had other things in their history, everything from the Mongols to the Manchu invading and all their. China's the most amazing history. I mean, I love Southern China, right? So, in any
Hmm.
event, through all that, somehow this system remained intact enough to get here. And when it got to Hong Kong, it exploded. Like the general public was allowed to learn Wing Chun by the time that was Sigong's decision. He wanted Wing Chun to never go out. So now the whole world has to learn it. So he started there. No Westerners were technically allowed to learn it while he was alive. The minute he passed away, his students were able to teach all over the world.
Hmm.
Before the movies even got here, Wing Chun's this amazing thing. Yip Man's like the greatest grandmaster anyone's ever known. And then Chinese movie making companies, which again have a lot of communist control over them, they suddenly make a movie supposedly about Yip Man. Now, there's a lot of movies made where Yip Man's character was in a lot of the earlier kung fu movies. That's another story, another time. But this one was Donnie Yen. Kind of interesting that they changed the name, like Ip Man instead of Yip Man. This is some decision that the government and the movie corporations all made, honestly. And then they try to have a story where it's like, well, this is a more original Chinese way of saying it, or this original Cantonese way. It's really not though, because like in the Futshan, there's a whole Yip like family descendants, and they all spell it with a Y even to this day. So
Oh, I
why they
see.
wanted to change it, I don't know. Who knows? In the movies, they never talk about the communist invasion. They're always blaming things on the British and the Japanese. When I was younger studying Wing Chun, I would have never thought there'd actually be a whole movie made about Sigo. I'm
Hmm.
amazed. And it's great that they made movies about it. And there's Wing Chun schools out here anyway already, but like these movies are not necessarily responsible for the growth of Wing Chun. I think they're a great promoter, and Wing Chun's out there. The name is out there even more. People have heard of this whole style. They spell it whichever way they want to spell it, whatever, but it's on a certain level, it's this household word now, right? And then
Yeah.
with Yip Man's name being almost a household word, unfortunately, it's a misspelling. It's IP Man instead of like Yip
Yeah.
Man.
Hmm.
Yip Man, Yip Man. That's actually the way the Cantonese pronounce it. Yip Man. The
Hmm.
Cantonese have deep bass, guttural sounds. Doje Mgola, Yip Man. You know, Gamla. Like that's the nature of it.
Uh-huh.
Yip Man. What he's responsible for, what he's done for the human race, you can't measure.
Moy Tung, I know we're a little short on time today,
Yep.
so we should
That's it.
probably.
Ryan is over here telling me right now we're
Right.
supposed to be going, so didn't mean to
Yeah.
take up too much of everybody's time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we've talked about a lot of really interesting stuff. The history is so interesting. I feel like we barely even scratched the surface of it.
Martial
And
arts is interesting that way, the army nature, the military nature of what martial arts is, etc. Wing Chun, Kung Fu is a certain, Japanese karate has its history very closely related to modern military stuff as well as their ancient military stuff. it's just very interesting the way Wing Chun really, really, really has been affected by history and also affects history. Because that whole thing during the World War II era is phenomenal. If Yip Man had died during that period, if something happened during the invasion where he was killed or died or something, we would not have Wing Chun today. That's all there is to it. He was that critical person at that critical time. He somehow survived. He made sure to do his job when he was in Hong Kong and creating the second school of Wing Chun. The first school was in Fat before the communist invasion, during the Japanese invasion, before the Japanese invasion, back in the early 20s and 30s. Got to remember Yip Man and the Wing Chun family and all, like they were putting Wing Chun out in certain circles, like it was a very secretive thing and all that, etc. But they're also fighting against like evil or just people who were being oppressive, like the Manchurian stuff. And, Yip Man was closely related to law enforcement. And they would have to go out there and stop like extremely murderous people, like murderous gangs and people that did stuff. I mean, Yip
Hmm.
Man was responsible for training a lot of military people so that those southern Chinese forces could fight against folks that were raiding villages or, committing huge crime in the cities. I mean, like, there's so many stories that we don't know about. But after he came to Hong Kong and went to school there, met Long Bick and all, he went back to Foshan, of course, and spent 30 years living there before he had to leave because of the communist invasion, from
Hmm.
like whatever 1945, go back to 1915. Yip Man lived in Foshan for 30 years, right? So what happened during that time period? How much Kung Fu was developed and all that? Why did he become the Grand Master? Even in Foshan, and there was a school there. There's a lot of Foshan family made it to Hong Kong too with Yip Man in the Hong Kong days. But when Yip Man started the school in Hong Kong, that's the second family. Like all the Hong Kong guys had older brothers from Foshan if they ever made it, and even uncles from some of the descendants of the Wing Chun families, right?
Hmm.
Kung Fu is a very interesting thing. It really connects with humans, just like a regular family. You have a grandfather from whenever, but you know, I mean, it's like because a couple of people got together, 100 years ago. For some reason, you're here. You know, somehow two people got together and they made someone. You know what I mean? It's funny, right? So somehow we get here. Kung Fu's like that. Like you run into someone who teaches you something that changes your entire physique and your mental focus when it comes down to life, but especially martial arts. So this person is a master and they teach you something where your fighting skill just jumps 100 times better than it's ever been. You're in shape, you're healthy, you can help other people, all this stuff. You learn it from someone. So of course that's why they give the Sifu so much respect. In China, that's the normal way of doing it. Guess what? It was like that in Europe too. When you wanted to learn from a master warrior in Europe, you had to pay your respects everywhere. It was like that in Africa. It was like that in everywhere in the world. You always have to show respect to the seniority of whatever martial arts someone wants to learn.
Yeah.
So, China really upheld that. They have a very high standard when it comes to martial art training. It's a super great thing. And I was just very lucky to have a actual disciple of Yip Man be my master. Like I thank God every day, and we've been able to enjoy teaching kung fu, and
Hmm.
doing it the right way, like the way that my Sifu really teaches. I don't try to change it. I don't modernize it. The students, some people don't like training under me because I don't modernize it. You know what I mean? I teach people how to do it the old school way, and I teach them how to go from like an hour and a half workout to the 4 hour workout if they want it. If they don't want the 4 hour workout, that's okay. They don't have to have the heavier schedule because the standard schedule is effective enough. It turns people into advanced fighters and they can defend themselves in a street fight, without a doubt. It's just that when people do the 4 hour program and they're really training their Wing Chun super hard and they have that straight relationship with the Sifu and everything and they're really learning it that way as a discipline, it just goes to a whole nother level. And that's available in Kung Fu. Kung Fu has that kind of capacity. So that's the one thing hopefully we can bring to the modern world is that knowledge and the opportunity for people. So,
Yeah.
more
I,
Sifus, get more hours. Anyway, I guess you guys got to go. Ryan's telling me we got to go.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's been really great. It's been really great speaking with you, listening to your experience,
Oh, yeah.
with Moy
No,
Yat.
thank
And
you. Thank you for
yeah.
allowing me to share. It's great you guys did this. I appreciate it. If you ever want to go over some kung fu again, whatever, talk
Mhm.
to, I guess, Tamara, and, you know, we take care of it. All right?
Yeah, that sounds great. All right.
Cool, man.
And so today we had Moy Tung, and he's in Richmond, Virginia. And how can our users find you if they want to find more information about you?
Uh, Moy Yat Kung Fu Richmond,
Hmm.
or even if they look up Moy Tung online, the information is there for sure. So, it's easy information to catch up with us and hang out. It'd be good to see
Okay.
everybody in person. Maybe one day we'll do a video podcast.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yep. Definitely
Wonderful.
cool, man. Thank you. Good meeting you too. And, thanks for, hanging out and sharing kung fu with everybody. And thanks for what you guys do, man. Really.
Yeah.
This is cool.
Thank you
Thank
for
you
coming
too.
on, Moy Tung. It was great having you.
Doje, I'm going. Really great meeting you guys. All right.
All right.
Anyway, stay safe. I'll see y'all later.
Okay, take care. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Wing Chun Discussion Podcast. Log on to wingchundiscussion.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. More episodes are available on iTunes, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.